Hi everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca and I create videos to inspire you to try embroidery and textile art, whether you're an experienced stitcher or a complete beginner. Now, each year on this channel we create a 52-week project called Winging It, and so far we've made a fabric book, and I'll link the playlist for that up here. We've also made a quilt on a garden theme, and you can find that on this playlist. And this year we're making 12 slow stitch panels to kind of journal our year, and we build each panel throughout the month. So in January we made a watery landscape, and I'll put a photo over here. In February we took inspiration from snowdrops and poetry, and we tried a bit of fabric weaving, and that looked like this. Last month we created a burst of spring florals using fabric manipulation techniques, and that was over here. And this month we're going to try something completely new. Now, I've never done anything like this before, and I really hope that you enjoy the journey, because this month we're going to create a fabric selfie. If you've been around on this channel for a while, you may have noticed that I very rarely put animals in my work, and I never put people in. It's all about nature for me, and so this is a complete departure. I'm a little bit nervous, I have to be honest. And as the name Winging It suggests, I create each piece with just minimal planning. I go through the whole process on camera, and so I will make mistakes, and I'm just learning as I go along. And I hope that showing you that process encourages you to give it a try yourself. It is just fabric and thread, and so what can possibly go wrong? So today we're going to start building our panel. We're going to manipulate a photograph to make it suitable to use as a template, and then we're going to create a background for our selfie using some of our favourite things. So you're going to need some fabric scraps, and I do mean scraps, tiny little pieces in your favourite colours and textures. You can also use fabrics that have meaning for you, so you can make this a kind of memory panel if you want to. You'll also need some straightforward sewing cotton, machine cotton will do. You'll also need either a photograph that you're happy to cut up, but I've used my computer, Microsoft Word and my printer at home to manipulate the photograph. Now, if you've never done anything like this before, don't worry, neither have I. I'll show you the entire process, including how I manipulate the photo. So hopefully you can recreate the process yourself at home. So don't be scared, gather all your bits and pieces, and let's get stitching.
Right, I've got my panel set up just as I normally do. So I've got a layer of wadding and a layer of my old bed sheet that I'm using as my backing fabric, and you can see I've measured out my panel, and we're using panels that are 24 centimetres long and 16 centimetres wide, roughly the proportions of a sheet of A4 paper, but not quite. And you can see that this time I am working portraits. Now, don't entirely know how this is going to work when I put my wall hanging together. I don't think it really matters. We're just going to have a play and see what happens. And the reason I'm working portrait is that this month I thought we could make a portrait. So April is my birthday month, and this year is the last year that I will be 40 something, so I turn 50 next year, and I thought it might be nice to journal this moment in my life. So just to create an image of myself that I can keep forever. Now, if you aren't keen on creating an image of yourself, you could do someone that's really important to you, you could do a pet, you could do a portrait of someone that you've lost who you want to remember. It's entirely up to you whose portrait you do. Now, I've never done this before, and I'm doing this without a safety net. I've not rehearsed because this is winging it, so you see me working through the process live, and we are just going to see what happens. Essentially, it's fabric and thread. What can possibly go wrong? So we're just going to give it a whirl and see what happens, and it may or may not end up looking like me. It may be a disaster, but that in itself is a record of something that we can keep for posterity. It's a record of our learning, of our process, and of our adventures in fabric and thread. So I'm just going to take the plunge and go for it before I chicken out. So here we go. I'm just going to switch to a capture of my monitor on my laptop, because what I've done is start with a photo of myself, and I just want to show you what I've done to that photo to make it suitable to use as a template. So here we go. So I'm just going to open up a blank document on my computer, and what I want to do is insert my picture. So I've gone to insert, I'm going to click pictures, and I want to insert from this device, and I think I'm going to use maybe this picture of myself. I think that's the one that I want to use. It will help me if I can see the whole page just for a moment, and I'm going to do some cropping of this. I want to crop, let's get it proportionally right first, and then we can make this 24. That's pretty good, look, 24 by 15.9. I can live with that. So we can then go back into crop, and I can move the image around in that box just to make it fit a bit better. There we go, that'll do. So I'm just going to do one little tweak and just move it slightly over. So now my picture is central in that box. So now we want to play around with this image just to make it a little bit more usable. So what I want to do is brighten it and increase the contrast. So I've just gone onto this corrections, and I am just using the presets. So I think that one's going to work quite well. And now I can go to this colour tab here, and I can turn it into a black and white image. You don't have to do this step at all, but sometimes your picture works really well as black and white. You can certainly put it into grayscale, because that helps you to see the lights and shades a little bit better. And now we can use this tool here, which is artistic effects, and that gives you a range of options that will change the appearance of the photo, and we want something like that really. But let's have a look at some of the other options. So these give different artistic textures, so that's a texturizer that puts a texture onto it. This is as if it's been cast in cement. That's as if I'm being looked at through glass. That's almost like mosaic tiles. That's got grain on it like it's a film, and then we're into more painterly examples. That's like a watercolour sponge. I think that one's pretty good. So I think I'm going to go with this chalk sketch, and that's what I'm going to work with for my picture. So I'm going to print that out, and then we're going to go on to the next stage. Right, so here is my printed out photo, and I'm just going to take my fabric away for a moment because I just want this board. I've got a soft pencil here, so this is a 4B pencil. You could use a pen for this, but I just want to be able to rub it out if needs be. So what I'm going to do is just draw around the outline of the shapes of my portrait. So I've got my shoulders there, and I'm going to draw around the outside of my hair, because what we want to do is turn this image into a template and a series of shapes that we can use to help us create some fabric shapes that we can then piece together. So I'm just going to do the top of my hairline here, so that's going to come down to there, and if I turn over onto the back, hopefully you can see the impression that that's leaving. That's going to help our cutting out. And then I'm going to do the same on this side, so I'm just going round the lighter bit of my hair here, and I know that there are shadows, we'll come to those in a minute. So we've got a parting there, something like that. So now we've got some shadows, and our hyper contrast has helped us spot where those shadows are. So I'm just going to capture those now. A shadow there, and then we've got a shadow under here, like that, and then we've got the outline of my shirt, like that, and my glasses chain because you can't have a portrait of me without that glasses chain. So we'll have that there, and we can use a ruler if you want to get the bottom line, but I'm just going to freehand it, it's fine. And up the side, I don't want the background, I just want the bit that's me, and I'm not worried about the pattern on my shirt either. So basically I'm just going to put in my chin like that, and we've got a little bit of shadow here under my chin, and now I'm going to capture my features. So I'm going to go round the outside of my eye, and I want to capture my pupil like that. So I've got my eyelid, pupil, and then the bottom of my eye. and I want this shape here, so I've got a bit of shadow. Let's capture nostrils. And I want the lines of my nose, so I've got some shadow here. Like that, and then I've got a shape here that is a mid-tone, and then a shape here that is a shadow, like that. So we are just reducing this to shapes that we can use to guide our cutting out and our building of the portrait. So I've got a shape there as well, and then I want this shape here. I'm in danger of making myself look like I've got a beard, but there we go. Let's capture the mouth. So I've got top lip there, and then bottom lip here, and then I want to capture the shape of my teeth, like that. And then I've got a shadow here. This one's going to come round here. And we need to capture this line here as well, like that. We've also got some stitching that probably we will need to put in here to create some shadow. And if I turn it over, I have got the outline there of just the vague impression of the shapes in this drawing, so that's where we're going to get to. So what I want to do now is get my paper scissors, and I just want to cut around the outside edge of that. Because today we're mostly going to be working on the background, because this is going to be a shape that we overlay onto a background. Well, I have to say I'm quite nervous so far. I've no idea if this is going to work. We can but try. But the process will be fun. I don't expect for a minute that it's going to look very much like me, but we're going to play around and get something approximating a likeness. Right, so there's my picture with my lines on it, and I'm going to bring in my panel. Oh look, that fits brilliantly. Excellent. Right, so there we go. What I need now is a heat erase pen, and I'm just going to, you could use a water erase pen as well if you want to, or a pencil would do fine. I'm just going to draw around the outside edge of my shape, so you can see what I mean by turning the picture into a template. So what we're going to work on today is all of this space. So I'm just going to mark it so that I know what I'm doing, and we probably will overlap the edge, so you need to keep this really safe because we're going to come back to this shortly. So I'm just going to put that off to one side. So I'm going to bring in my scraps bin, and you can see that there is a lot of fabric in here. There's a huge amount of fabric. Now in here are lots of fabrics that I've used this year, so you will be able to see some from the garden quilt, and you might be able to see some that we've used in our winging it panels so far this year. But what I'm going to do is try and build a background from scraps. So we're going to do a kind of crazy patchwork, and what I'd like you to try and do if possible is use your favourite colours. So we've done a thematic colour scheme for each month so far. I would like you to build a background out of colours that you really like. So this is going to be a reflection of you. So I'm bringing my background back into focus. This box is very big, and I'm going to just pick out fabrics that I really like. So it'll either be the colour or the texture that I think is really lovely. My favourite colour is green, so there's going to be a fair amount of green in here, I think. But I also like lovely textures, like there's a lovely bit of almost tweed there that I think is gorgeous. So I might fast forward this bit because I'm going to be digging around quite a lot in this giant bucket of delights. This is fabric that we tried to use last month. That's the one that I painted with acrylic. That was a dismal failure. I think that ought to go in there. It's a record of the catastrophe. This is about me, not about my successes. I do love, let's have a record of the garden quilt, which I think I'm going to finish this month as well. Oh, I love this. This was a tiny scrap of liberty that I got from a fabric shop that I often source materials from for our products. A little bit of red there. That's a little scrap from a pair of pyjamas that my daughter wore. So I really have got all sorts in here. So you're looking for fabrics that you like, fabrics that maybe tell something of your story. There's a nice bit of brighter green. Fabrics that maybe speak of who you are. Now this I've got to use. So this is spider's web, and it was sent to me by somebody that followed Winging It back in 2022. I got a lovely little parcel through the post, and she'd sent me loads of spider's web lace, and it was just such a joy to receive her letter and to know that what we were doing on YouTube mattered so much. It was an absolute joy. I do love it. I had a lovely time at the Craft for Crafters event with so many people just popping in to say hi, who'd been following on YouTube and just wanted to come and either show me what they'd been making or just catch up. And it was just so lovely. So it really matters to me that you want to engage. It is one of the. I was so scared of putting things out there on YouTube, and it has turned into one of the great joys in my life. So thank you to everybody that popped along, who bought a kit, who said hello, who just, thank you. it really matters to me. So let's start with this. Probably got far too much here, but let's see what we can do. Right, this piece of fabric needs to feature. So what I'm going to do is just take off any raw bits, and I just want to make small pieces that I can use to create a background. So I'm just going to snip that down. As always, we'll trim this back so it's not a problem. And we're just going to create some crazy patchwork really. So I'm just going around the edge of the shape. Let's get a bit of denim. Doesn't all have to be green. Let's see if we can pop a bit of denim here and there as well. We can make a bit of an edge here. And this fabric I really love. So I've been making some table mats, placemats for my dining room for about 100 years, and this is one of the fabrics. I actually used to run a community craft group in Lincoln, and I put a message out, this is going to date it, put a message out on Free Cycle. that sets it in time, doesn't it? Does anyone use Free Cycle anymore? Asking for any old clothes or fabric scraps, and I had a message from a lady who lived in the middle of nowhere, and she said, oh, I've got some fabric scraps and some bits of wool that you can have. And I went out there, and I'm not joking, there were hundreds of pounds worth of fabrics in the bag. Moda, there were like proper quilting fabrics, there were whole dress making lengths, like yards of fabric that she'd obviously bought to make an item of clothing out of, and we made great use of it. So the group was free of charge. We relied on donations of resources, and that kept us going for absolutely ages. It was such a generous donation. And there were loads of anchor walls as well. There was a half finished tapestry in there that I finished and gave to my mum. It was just an amazing gift. So there are some really generous people out there in the world. Couldn't quite believe it. So I've got these little applique pins here that I'm just popping on, and I just want to overlap the outline ever so slightly so that when I come to put my fabric on for my portrait, I'm not going to have a line of white. So I'm just going to move these in a little bit because I haven't been quite generous enough there. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm just popping in these little pieces of fabric, fabrics that either matter to me or that are my favourites, and I just want to create a sketchy, patchy background that says something about me. I've got this lovely bit of woolly, tweedy fabric here. I don't want to cut that too small because I think it's going to fray. So I'm just going to tuck that in here, and what I don't want is to create a grid. So I don't want lots of rectangular pieces all in a line. I'm just going to overlap and create some angles and things going in lots of different directions. also thinking about the shades that are going to be on the portrait itself, because I've got quite fair hair, so I don't want anything too light around the outside edge, because it's going to not offer enough contrast with my hair. And I think we're just one or two pieces away from being done. I haven't got any of this in, that's what I need. A bit of scrim, that's what this is called. It's like sacking, sort of loose sacking material, and I use it all the time. Just absolutely love the texture of it. So let's put that in there, and we haven't used our spider's web, so this is where I might save that until the end, but I'm going to keep it out. So I'm just going to clear away my scraps, and what I want is just some sewing thread. So I'm going to pick an olive green kind of colour. Got another work in progress there that's just appeared on camera. It was a demonstration piece when I was at school and doing a sewing club at lunchtimes, and that was a little piece that I demonstrated techniques on, and I never finished it because I demonstrate something and then help all the children with their sewing. So yeah, never finished it. Right, so we've got our outline. I've got my thread. This is just normal sewing cotton, and what I want to do is tack all of these pieces down. So I'm not going to be fussy about it. I'm just going to try if I can bring you a bit closer so you can see what I'm doing a bit better. There we go. I'm just going to running stitch, and if you want to you can do an invisible stitch. So I've come out there, I'm going back in very close, and I'm putting my longer stitch on the back so you can hardly see anything on the front. And if you want it to be super secure, you can kind of do it as a back stitch, but it is not a requirement because we will be sewing over this. So just think about where you're placing your stitches. You kind of want the edges of each piece to be secured down. So I'm just making sure that as I am working on the right hand side of my pieces at this while I'm working on the left, so that I've got a line around where my portrait is going to be, and as I'm putting stitches in I'm just going to go along and take the pins out, and I'm making sure that there is a little stitch towards the outer edge of the piece. And obviously sometimes you are going to be working with fabrics that fray, so just be aware of that. That denim doesn't like being stitched at the edge. That's why denim has lapped seams, because it does fray really badly. Taking out the pins for me, you can leave them in until the very last minute, but it helps me keep a track on where I've already sewn. Obviously we've covered up our outline. That's not a problem because we've still got our template, we can redraw it. The point of putting the outline on first was to save us wasting fabric, so what we don't want is to put loads of fabric in a place where it's going to be covered up. So popping our outline on gives us a kind of outer edge to work to, so that we don't just fill the space with loads of scraps of fabric that are just going to be then covered up by our portrait. and I'm just going to loosely tie that off because it is just a tacking stitch, and you get the idea. So I'm going to stitch right across that now and make sure everything's stitched down, but I'm sure you can I'm not going to do anything different to what I've just done, so there's a limit to how much running stitch I want to make you endure. So I'm just going to stitch that and then we'll come back and see how it's looking. Okay, so here we are. I've done a little bit of trimming, only very roughly. Got a stubborn corner there, just to kind of even out the edges and take off any really obvious frayed bits, and just to give me a sense of the boundary of the piece of art that I'm making. So just getting rid of those little bits, and that gives me a much clearer kind of edge. Really liking that as a background, and I thought before I finish I could just put in some little bits of this spider's web. So I've got some white here, and I'm just going to put little sections of it here and there just to add another texture into the background. Got this lovely glittery stuff here that I think is kind of magical. So I'm just laying it in places that I think could do with a little bit of interest. That's a bit sort of beige and dull there, so I'm just livening that up. And maybe down here, that might be nice. Let's have an extra bit of white. I do have some creamier coloured spider's web. See, that bit's lacking something there. Maybe just put another piece of gold. Suddenly it's looking a bit Christmassy. Maybe layer two up there, like that. Okay, so I'm just going to catch that down in very much the same way. Should have said that you could equally use a fabric glue to stick all of these bits of fabric down, but you know me and glue, anything that gets on my hands I'm not a massive fan of. Have used it a bit so far in this year's project, but it's not my go-to, and I kind of tend to forget that I've got it because I so rarely use it. This literally takes a couple of stitches to just hold it in place. It's like I keep saying, we are going to stitch over the top of this background, so you don't need to worry too much. So I'm just doing a kind of invisible tacking stitch, just catching over one of the little wires on the spider's web. It's a type of lace that is just a bit more haphazard and random. I do like lace, but I find it very difficult to find a lace that I think is really me. I'm not a particularly frilly, or I'm not into frills and bling, and so lace often feels wrong for me. But I do love it. I love the artistry of it, particularly handmade lace, which is very expensive. But yeah, it's hard to find a lace that I think is like me, if that makes any sense. So I tend not to use it, but this stuff is so delicate and subtle. Not that I'm a particularly delicate person, but it's so subtle. It doesn't kind of draw attention to itself, and I feel much more comfortable with this than I do any other kind of lace. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if there's a fabric or a resource in textiles that you find really difficult to use because it just doesn't suit your style. I'm not very blingy either, so I've got loads of sequins, but I don't tend to use those. So yeah, I'd be interested to know. Or colours maybe. Are there any colours that you just don't think are you? I don't use very much orange, even though I love autumnal colours. So that would be my colour that I hardly ever use. I do have quite a bit of orange stuff, but yeah, it doesn't get an airing very often because it just doesn't quite sit right with me. I don't really know why. I always find it fascinating that people have really strong emotional reactions to colours. So green always makes me happy. It kind of doesn't even matter what shade. I I just love green. It makes me feel at home, it makes me feel comfortable. I just love it. Pink, I have the opposite reaction to. I find pink a really stressful colour in whatever shade. I think probably shocking pink is worse. I can just about cope with a sort of dusky rose, that kind of pink, but I have quite a strong reaction to shades of pink, and I can't account for it. I don't know what it is. It's bizarre. And I know pink is a lot of people's favourite colour. So yeah, it's funny how we respond quite a visceral way, I think, to fairly benign resources. It doesn't mean any harm, does it? A bit of pink fabric, but or a bit of lace, but I seem to react unnecessarily strongly to these things. Hey ho. This one is all about using what you love. So I love spider's web, so I'm using it. There we go. That's just added a little bit of something textural and kind of visual because it's, gosh, I've got a long trailing thread there. I wonder if that's going to cause me problems later. I'm sure it'll be fine. Yeah, it's quite visual because I've got some sparkly in here. It's just adding something quite subtle, but just a little bit extra, and I quite like that. That just needs one more stitch, I think. So I'll show you the back just so that you are reassured. You can see it's really crazy. That's my super long bit of trailing thread. I'm sure it'll be fine. But yeah, it's just really haphazard, and I've just stitched in a way that makes sure everything's caught down. I love the fact that I love these sort of whispers and shadows of the design. You can see the outline of the face there. And there we go. So we've got our scrappy patchwork background that is going to frame our self-portrait, and next week, sorry about the sun, it's just come out, it's a rare occurrence, so I'm not going to shut it away. So next week we're going to start working on our actual portrait, so enjoy finding all of your favourite scraps and bits and pieces and making your background. I can't wait to see what you create. do share your work at hashtag FSHWingingIt24, and if you want to share in a safer way, you can always join our private Facebook group, and the details of that are in the description below. Whatever you share, don't forget to tag me at Featherstitch House, and that way I'm guaranteed to see what you have created. So look forward to seeing your favourite things in your background, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!